and start that hearing with an overview from our reviser, Tamara Lawrence.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, Committee. Senate Bill 350 would enact the Age-Appropriate School Device Act to establish safety standards and requirements for the use of school-issued digital devices in certain grade levels. The bill does contain definitions, including a definition of digital device. So for grades kindergarten through 5, the bill would require no student use a digital device in the classroom. All instruction would be print-based, and all tests and assessments would use printed materials. For grades 6 through 8, the bill would provide that students may use shared digital devices for instructional purposes, and there would be no access to non-instructional content. Only physical textbooks could be used, and the total amount of time that a student spends on a digital device during normal school hours could not exceed 1 hour per school day. Digital devices would be required to remain on the school premises, and the school would be required to provide age-appropriate media literacy instruction to all students, including health-related harms of excessive digital device use. For grades 9 through 12, the bill would provide the school may issue digital devices to individual students for instructional purposes. For these students, the total amount of time they could spend on a device would be 1 hour and 30 minutes. Any assignment that would require a school-issued digital device use outside of the normal school hours may only require up to 1 hour of use per day. Online or digital textbooks may be used if there are no other options. And again, the school would be required to provide age-appropriate media literacy instruction to all students. Section 2 of the bill would require that the school ensure that certain digital device setup and safety standards are implemented for grades 9 through 12. You can see the specific requirements for those standards on page 2, starting in line 5 of the bill. Section 3 would require that any school that plans to issue a digital device to students in grades 9 through 12 to accept a written request from a parent or person acting as parent to opt their student out of issuing the digital device, a requirement that the student take the digital device home or away from the school, and the use of the digital device for standardized testing or assessments. Section 4 would provide an exception if the use of the digital device is required by the student's IEP or 504 plan, or approved by a licensed healthcare professional as a medical necessity. Senate Bill 350 would take effect on July 1 upon publication in the statute book, and I'll be happy to answer questions.
Committee, what questions do we have for the reviser? Seeing none. Oh, Senator Sykes.
Sorry, can I get a copy of your testimony? I don't see it on the website.
I'll make sure it's there.
Thank you. And I guess my question, and I don't know if you know this, maybe this is a request from research, but I know a lot of textbook companies are moving to digital. So my question is, are textbooks available for these like grades where we're asking them to have them in paper copies?
Staff will work to make sure you get an answer for that.
Any other questions for the reviser? Seeing none, thank you, Tamara, appreciate it. We will now move to proponent testimony, and we will allow 2.5 minutes per conferee, and we will begin with Emily Brownlee, parent. Is Emily here or on? Emily. Welcome to committee. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I will try to stick to that. Okay. Dear Madam Chair and committee, thank you for listening to my testimony supporting SB 350. I am afraid it's negligent to continue to ignore the overwhelming research that exposes how educational technology, known as EdTech, harms learning, cognitive growth, and student well-being. Neuroscientist Dr. Jared Cooney-Horvath issues a powerful warning. The rapid rise of technology in education is contributing to a sharp decline in intelligence across key metrics. He has learned through years of research that the more tech in schools, the more learning and well-being goes down. For generations, we've seen steady progress in IQ from one cohort to the next. That upward trajectory ends with Gen Z. On every single cognitive measure, they perform worse than we do: attention, memory, creative thinking, divergent thinking, and critical thinking. And this cognitive demise is accelerating with Gen Alpha. It's clear that ed tech is problematic and harmful, and I'm going to share with you a few reasons why. First of all, ed tech tools do not improve learning. In fact, they erode deep thinking, cognitive retention, and classroom engagement. When a computer is used for school, students typically last fewer than 6 minutes before playing video games, accessing social media, messaging friends, and engaging with other digital distractions. This is why when using a laptop during class, students typically spend 38 minutes of every hour off task. Second, ed tech is a threat to student privacy. One-on-one devices were not intended to enhance learning. They were created to harvest student data. Many adaptive and interactive learning tools use facial expressions, voice recordings, and engagement patterns to collect, steal, and sell student information. Majority of EdTech's privacy agreements say, quote, when you access or use our service, you are deemed to consent to the collection, use, retention, transfer, structuring, manipulation, storage, transmission, and or disclosure of your information, end quote. Third, EdTech reinforces addiction pathways. Excessive interactive screen time and gamified learning flood young brains with inhumane amounts of dopamine, leading to depression and addiction. Screens send unnatural and overstimulating messages to the nervous system, contributing to hyperarousal and triggering fight or flight responses. Screens also cripple executive functioning skills, which include problem solving, focus, working memory, self-control, and self-motivation. Lastly, EdTech harms teachers and threatens the teaching profession. Instead of looking at eager faces ready to learn, teachers are staring at the backs of computer screens. Instead of passionately teaching enriching content, teachers are policing student digital activity minute by minute. Please sign SB 350 into law and rescue education from this failed experiment. Thank you.
Thank you for being here. Next, we have Katie Longhauser, a parent on WebEx. Is Katie with us?
Hi, yes, I'm here.
Hi, Katie. Thank you for being here. You have 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to address you today. My name is Katie Longhauser. I'm a former nurse, a parent, and founder of the Screen Guardians, a program dedicated to educating and protecting children and communities in today's digital world. My mission is simple: helping kids thrive in a technology-saturated environment. Over the past decade, classroom screen use has increased dramatically. Yet during the same time, national reading scores have declined, with 9 to 13-year-olds experiencing some of the steepest drops in decades. Research shows that students who use tablets in all or most of their classes score the equivalent of a full grade level lower in reading compared to students who never use them. At the same time, teens now average more than 7 hours per day of recreational screen use outside of school. Nearly half report being online almost constantly. Cognitive science consistently shows that students comprehend more deeply when reading from print. They retain more when handwriting notes and sustain attention better without constant digital stimulation. Developing brains require focus, repetition, and deep work, not fragmented attention. Meanwhile, many digital platforms, even those used in schools, are built using persuasive design principles, engineered to capture and hold attention. That design may increase engagement metrics, but it does not always strengthen learning outcomes. In fact, studies show it has failed. Technology is not going away, and this bill is not anti-technology, it's pro-child development. Our children do not need to learn on screens all day. They need strong foundations in literacy, attention, and critical thinking. They need education about technology, how a constant influx of dopamine and algorithms shape behavior, how persuasive design works, and how to protect their privacy and focus. Senate Bill 350 establishes developmentally appropriate guardrails, protecting foundational years in elementary school, allowing structured and supervised use in middle school, and introducing one-to-one devices responsibly in high school. This bill prioritizes developing brains over digital consumption. It protects learning, it protects privacy, and it protects children. I respectfully urge you to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Next, we have Gretchen Shanahan, a parent on WebEx as well. Gretchen, are you there? We can hear you. Thank you for being here. You have 2.5 minutes.
Can you see me?
We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that.
Well, hang on. We might be getting you here. Just a sec. No, but we can hear you. So if you would like to proceed.
Okay. I support SB 350. Surveillance capitalism has captured education. As early as 2014, a prominent EdTech CEO stated that education, quote, is the world's most data mineable industry by far, while dismissing legitimate concerns from parents and policymakers about threats to student privacy, opportunity, and self-determination. We can look to global and national gold standard studies on education, such as the OECD and PISA, to see that test scores have been falling substantially as schools have implemented one-to-one so-called digital learning. Students have become significantly less computer literate the more time they have spent on computers. My own high school sophomores, who are both honor students, can only peck at laptop keys because their school has never taught keyboarding. Can you imagine requiring a student to use a tool daily and never showing them how to use the tool in the most efficient way? My kids are lead plaintiffs in a class action lawsuit against a commonly used EdTech program who we discovered was stealing their personal information for profit. Did you know these companies take students' de-identified information and then utilize identity resolution companies to follow our students for advertising purposes? My children never consented to be exploited. I never consented to this theft of time on my children. I have been outspoken about EdTech's harm since 2018. This is not new news. Why are local and state decision makers just now becoming interested in this information? My own district has given children as young as preschool iPads for 10 years now. I would normally trust my local and state administration for making the best decisions for my students' education. However, they have implemented devices and content not properly designed or vetted for the classroom for a decade. In 2016 or 2026, they still cannot prove their efficacy. Despite tons of evidence that one-to-one is harming education, we hear endless excuses about causation, cost, etc. This has eroded my trust and proven that allowing this robber baron industry to educate our kids should not be a case-by-case local decision. Please pass this bill. Thank you so much.
Well, your timing was perfect. Thank you. Thank you for being here. Next, we have Erica Sheets, Chair of the Johnson County Chapter of Moms for Liberty, also on WebEx. Erica, are you there?
Yes, can you hear me, Madam Chair?
We can hear and see you, so you have
Hi, everybody.
you have 2.5 minutes.
Okay, great. Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members, for having me. I am here today as a Kansas parent and as the Moms for Liberty Johnson County Chapter Chair in support of SB 350. A student's brain does not know who owns the device. 10 years ago, Kansas schools rushed into a one-to-one device digital instruction model without really asking the most basic question, which is, what does this do to a child's learning? Research shows that 25% of students spend more than 4 hours daily on school devices, and 50% spend between 1 to 4 hours daily. KSDE academic performance reports a shocking decline over this same 10-year period. There is a 10% more Kansas students testing at the bottom limited level 1 than there were 10 years ago. 33.24% of Kansas students are in that limited level 1 in math. And these numbers are for math. The 10-year decline in ELA is that there are 11.6% more Kansas students testing at the bottom limited level, with over 32% sitting in that category. And almost 9% less Kansas students are testing in level 3, the proficient level, in ELA than there were 10 years ago. And over that same 10-year period, we have an average ACT decline of 12.3%. The ever-increasing costs of digital instruction curriculum, training, seat licenses, software upgrades, apps, and more is actually 10 times that of traditional instruction materials, of which there are plenty, and let's be real. If a state education system has demand for those materials, that will drive supply. Local control is technically possible here, but realistically out of reach. Do you have any idea how hard it is to be a parent going up against a single school district, much less an entire state agency, and all the different organizations that have paid staff that are supporting the establishment? Really, the educational establishment favors consensus and trends, and that's what we've seen here in Kansas. So parents and legislators need to force a reset. These numbers demonstrate that this is a statewide problem. It's not a local problem. The reset we need.
I'm sorry, Ms.
Yes?
Sheets, your time has expired. Do you have a concluding remark?
Yes, thank you. I would say my concluding remark would be parents and legislators need to force this reset, and I very much encourage you to pass SB 350. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have Kim Whitman, co-lead of Smartphone Free Childhood U.S. Distraction Free Schools Policy Project and SMSD Digitally Wise. Welcome to committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Kim Whitman, and I'm a parent of 2 teenagers in a Kansas public school. I'm here in strong support of SB 350 because what I've seen over the past 12 years should concern anyone who cares about children's learning and development. When my youngest started kindergarten, she was handed an iPad as part of the new one-to-one digital initiative. Every K through 6 student received an iPad, and every 7th through 12th student received a MacBook, even though teachers weren't well trained to use them. Classroom printers were removed, and teachers were evaluated on how much they used the devices. Those devices came loaded with more than 300 apps, including open internet browsers, YouTube, news app, and countless games. Many children were exposed to inappropriate content, and despite all the technology, students weren't even taught how to type, like we heard the earlier speaker say. A kindergartner swiping an iPad is not developing the same fine motor skills as a child holding a crayon. When hands-on learning is replaced by screens, development suffers. Parents push back, but 12 years later, every student still receives a device, and much of the curriculum exists only on that device. Learning requires focus and deep engagement, reading physical books, writing by hand, thinking independently. Instead, students rely on Google and AI to complete work, and they struggle to concentrate amid constant digital distractions. Teachers can't realistically teach while also policing students who are watching videos in class. The consequences are clear. Students' attention spans are fragmented. Many struggle to read independently. My son's 9th grade ELA class had to read a novel out loud together because students couldn't sustain focus to read it on their own. College professors nationwide report that students are arriving unprepared, yet districts remain committed to a failed, expensive experiment. SB 350 is a necessary course correction. Our children's education and future are at stake. I urge you to pass this bill and help restore balance, focus, and real learning in Kansas classrooms. I also want to point out that in my district, I believe it's close to $12 million that they spend on iPads for elementary alone, every 3 years. That's $12 million they spend every 3 years. That money could be freed up for other uses like curriculum. So if there's talk of unfunded mandate, let's talk about all the costs. That's just in the device alone. That's not in any of the programs or anything else. I also—
Ms. Whitman, I'm sorry, your time has expired. Do you have a closing comment?
I do. Madam Chair, you should have received a copy of the Digital Delusion in the mail. If anybody else would like one, I have copies for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Committee, that concludes oral proponent testimony. What questions do we have for the proponents? Senator Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Ms. Whitman, you just said something that I think is really interesting and important. You referred to the use of digital devices as an expensive and costly experiment. And I have to say that I think that I agree with you, because as the new and exciting tools, right, in many ways were rolled out, they were widely and broadly adopted without really fully understanding the implications on education. And the scientific evidence is now becoming manifest a decade later after broad adoption. Do you think that the use of, if it's tablets, if it's laptops, whatever, that there are legitimate use cases for those technologies in K-12 education? And if yes, where would those be?
Yes, absolutely. Our children should be learning about how to use technology as opposed to having it embedded in all of their curriculum. So we need ed tech, we need tech ed, not ed tech.
Senator Gossage.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If the last woman who just came up, if you don't mind coming back up, sorry. Thank you. Ms. Whitman, thank you for being here. I'm wondering if anyone, any of the proponents that you're aware of have spoken to any of your school district, local superintendents, the Board of Education? If so, how far did you get with them?
Madam Chair, we have been speaking to our local district for since 2018. They rolled out the one-to-one in 2015, and we have been raising concerns since 2018. And very little has changed. They don't want to hear our voice. It's really sad. I do believe in local control. I do. But they're not doing it, and our children are suffering. So change needs to happen.
And what about the Kansas Board of Education? Have you reached out to anybody there?
Yes, I've spoke at the Kansas board, as has a couple other proponents to this bill. I believe for the last 2 years, there have been people speaking at their public comment as well.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Ms. Whitman. I have a question as well. Testimony pretty much focused on academic performance and cost of devices. We in the legislature are seeing a dramatic increase in mental health costs across the state, and in particular in our K-12 education. If any of your research or reading indicate that there is a connection between the use of digital devices and mental health?
Madam Chair, absolutely, Senator Hill. There's lots of studies that have shown a correlation. Even 1 hour of exposure, like reading, goes down for kids who've been on social media for an hour. Their ability to comprehend and learn goes down. Teenagers are spending 5+ hours a day on devices, and that's taking away from real world learning and opportunities. It's displacing, and they're becoming very isolated. Our schools focus a lot on belonging, and that's because everybody's face down in a device. And so if we would just be more proactive and remove those devices, what we've found in districts that do roll back technology, kids start engaging and having relationship again and participating in after-school activities, and that improves mental health, right, instead of draining mental health.
Just to follow up on that, so you kind of mentioned that there's some districts that are rolling back the use of devices. Are you seeing that starting to be a trend across the state?
I am aware of districts across the nation. We have one in Kansas, McPherson, and I believe Mound Ridge as well, are two districts that have rolled back technology. In their middle school, the principal has removed the one-to-one program and went to a computer cart method and is seeing vast benefits in doing that.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator Sykes.
Thank you. Thank you for being here, Kim. I have a question. So I think we need to do a better job of educating our kids about devices and some of the dangers. My question is on one of this, I think it's on page 2 of the bill, it's talking about that the schools would talk about some of those dangers, but that they couldn't use social media. And I'm going back to one of my friends who was an anchor in a TV station, and she was in one of these schools and talking about safety, and they actually had everyone take a selfie, and then she showed they all sent it, and then showing how some of the security is not there of like what was available. So I think there is room for this, but I'm wondering if some of the things that we're putting in the legislation is maybe tying our hands and not allowing us to actually educate kids on some of that. Then also so I know I had kids who, as they were writing their essays or doing homework, sometimes there's a provision in this bill that for either 9 through 12, like their homework could only be an hour on a computer. As procrastinators, they are very well achieving children. I'm very proud of both of them. But I know like sometimes writing those essays was longer than an hour. So do you think there's some flexibility in maybe some of the language of the bill to, yes, capture, like I do think we need to go back to some basics, but maybe we're going maybe a little too far?
Senator Sykes, I believe you can educate without access. We do that with many things, whether it be cigarettes, nicotine, sex ed, all kinds of things. We educate without permitting access, so we don't need the devices to do a real life selfie to understand the impact of that. To your second point, I do believe there is flexibility, but I would love to point out that research shows writing a paper is much more effective for learning, and you absorb so much more and your process is more efficient than doing it on a device. So absolutely there is flexibility, but if we focus on what the neuroscientist says is the best way to learn, we will see that these devices aren't needed at the extent that we use them.
Cindy Rose.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This question is for any of the proponents. Does this legislation apply to private schools?
Madam Chair, good question. I don't know the answer.
I'm going to turn to the reviser.
Thank you, Madam Chair. School is defined on page 1 of the bill and means any school operated by a school district. So it would not apply to private schools.
Okay, thank you very much. And committee, we're going to take a brief interlude from the hearing for a moment, because if you notice, we had some very special guests join us. And Greg Schneider, if you would like to introduce our special guests in education today.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I think 4 of you have the teachers in your district, so that's great. This is always a great day for me. First off, I'm the Assistant Vice President of Government Relations and Economic Development. It doesn't fit very well on a card or a letterhead, but at Emporia State, and I've been doing this 5 years. I'm a distinguished professor myself. I don't know how I got that, but these teachers are more deserving of their awards than I am. But since 1954, the Emporia State has recognized master teachers in the state of Kansas, and we have 7 each year selected by a committee. They submit portfolios and go through a rigorous process of review. And I'm happy to introduce those people today. We have Emily Chandler, who's the 5th grade teacher at Fort Riley Elementary in Geary County. Casey Uwe, an 8th grade social studies teacher at Susan B. Anthony Middle School in Manhattan-Ogden District. Kathleen Gilliland, a mathematics and robotics teacher at Emporia High School in Emporia. Heather Hall, a science and research teacher at Blue Valley West High School in Blue Valley. Michelle Kelly, a K-5 reading interventionist at Glenwood Ridge Elementary in Basehor Linwood. Rachel Tanney, a gifted teacher at Heatherstone Elementary, Sunnyside Elementary, and Madison Place Elementary in Olathe. So she gets around. And Kimberly Tate, a 7th grade math teacher at Chisholm Middle School in Newton. So we would like to welcome them. And I'd also like to welcome 3 people who accompanied me from Emporia State. Stephanie Taylor, who works in the dean's office, and 2 of our elementary ed students, Brooklyn Morrison and Darbin Chadwick. I'd like to welcome them as well. And you can question the teachers away if you have time, or we're at your disposal.
Welcome so much. Welcome. To Senate Education, and thank you so much for being here and all that you do for Kansas kids. We might take about 30 seconds. We're in the middle of a bill hearing, so we'll see if there are any immediate questions from the committee. Senator Thomas.
No question, just a comment. This is a cool day to have Miss Tinning here. She actually taught my daughter Reagan at Madison Place in 2nd grade, so big fan of hers. So thank you, and congratulations.
And you're still standing after having one of Senator Thomas's children. So, anything else for our special guest today? Senator Gossage.
I'm looking forward to honoring Michelle Kelly from Basel Linwood, and I believe it's the first time that there has been a master teacher from Basel Linwood in, 50 years, something like that. So that's exceptional. Congratulations. She's a reading teacher, and so was I. So we have a lot in common.
Senator Starnes.
I appreciate you guys being here and for everything you do. Obviously, others speak highly of you as well. So keep doing a great job and keep working to help our kids. And Dr. Casey, it's 30th in Manhattan's illustrious careers. So welcome, appreciate it.
Senator Arterbright.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I get to speak in the chamber, so I'm just going to say congratulations, welcome, and pay attention to what we're talking about because we need your feedback. Thank you.
Okay, again, welcome. And Kimberly, tell William hi. William's here. Oh, okay. I'll say hi to him. And as a former student at Chisholm Middle School in Newton, Kansas, good to see you and welcome. So congratulations again to all of you and welcome. We look forward to recognizing you on the floor here shortly. Okay, we will now turn back to the hearing, and I'll draw the committee's attention to proponent written only testimony from Holly Biagioli, parent, Matt Brownlee, Debbie Detmer, Claudia Fury-Aguar, Jamie Klinda, and Marie Smith. We have no neutral oral, but we do have neutral written only from Frank Harwood, Deputy Commissioner, Kansas State Department of Education. We will now turn our, were you written only, Dr. Harwood? Okay, we will, come on up. I'm sorry. I had you down as written only, but we will accept your oral testimony. Welcome.
Just here on the behalf of State Department of Education, just actually to point out some things that would come up if this bill were enacted. I will say that the state board and several local school boards are already looking at this. The state board did an extensive survey that they got a report on, I think right after the first of the year. So this is something that the state board is looking at. Some things that come up immediately, especially at the elementary level, is that if this bill were enacted for next school year, we would not be able to implement the state assessment, nor would districts be able to do the required dyslexia screeners. The reason for that is the current state assessment uses technology-enhanced items, things that like shade in particular areas or move things to a different place. So you can't translate that to paper and pencil, so we'd have to do a new test. The dyslexia screeners typically are computer adaptive tests. So what that does is if a student gets a question wrong, it goes to an easier question. If it gets it right, it goes to a harder question to hone in more on their performance. And so the dyslexia screeners actually start in kindergarten. State assessment start in 3rd grade. When you start looking at all grades, there are some things like IXL Math, which is a virtual math product that the legislature funds that would not be able to be used K-5, would probably be limited at the other grades because of the amount of time. And then at the high school level, especially this going into effect with it's 90 minutes total, would impact course offerings. The teacher that taught robotics, if you take robotics in your book, you've overrun your time on devices. The other thing would be, especially in our smaller districts, where they do a lot of in order to offer a wider variety of curriculum, they use either remote, or even virtual. I know this doesn't apply to virtual schools, but they're not in a virtual school, they're in an in-person school, they just are using a virtual method. That could impact those. So especially at the high school level, could significantly impact the types of curricular offerings, especially in CTE. So with that, I would stand for questions.
Are there questions for Dr. Harwood? Senator Petty.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Dr. Harwood, you just mentioned about virtual schools. So virtual schools, some of them are parts of school districts. So when you said they would or would not be impacted, it seems like they would.
So, I mean, that rule would have to get worked out. In some cases, a student is a part-time virtual student and a part-time in-person student. In that case, I would say they were enrolled in a virtual school that time, and it wouldn't count. In some cases, they are not enrolled in a virtual school. They are taking a class virtually. So then at that point, they're technically still enrolled as an in-person student. So without some clarification, that seems to be problematic with that 90-minute limit. But more importantly, I just think about, my wife is a former yearbook editor, and my daughter did the same thing. And without being able to use a computer for yearbook editing, that would make that very different and not give students the experience on the tools that they would be using later on. So it has different impacts at different times. I think it goes back a little bit, especially at this high school level, 90 minutes may be especially limiting. A total ban at the elementary also then has some limits. I think districts are looking at, especially when we look at the very few using them pre-K and then not using them as much up. We probably on our next survey need to do a better job of looking at like K1, 2 different from 3, 4, 5, just to see, is there less at the very young grades. We divided it to pre-K, elementary, middle, and high school. So probably more questions need to be asked there.
Can I do a follow-up? I just wondered when I looked at the bill, it talks about that it directs in the bill that schools would have to provide age-appropriate media literacy instruction to all students. Do our schools currently have anything involved or as part of curriculum when it comes to media literacy instruction? And then it also says that they should not deliver it with, such instructions shall be delivered without the use of a digital device.
I will have to check on the state standard to see how that is embedded in actual state standards. I know that the districts I have worked in have looked at both, digital literacy and digital citizenship. So I do believe that is happening in most places. I've heard the conversations about typing and keyboarding before. In districts that I was working in, we actually taught keyboarding, typically in the middle school, but that has changed over time too.
Thank you.
Senator Sykes, and then we're going to have to move on.
Thank you. As you were talking about virtual schools, and I think, maybe we have to clarify because I think some are part of our school districts. But with some of the language, and especially as the bill that we passed previously, making for testing purposes and enabling that camera. So my question is just how would we deal with some of those issues? Because I know they are part of the school districts, and some of this, it seems, would counter legislation that we passed, at least in the Senate.
So the way I've interpreted the bill as I read it the first time is that if you are enrolled in a virtual program, either part-time or full-time, then this bill does not apply because virtual schools are exempted. It does require the disabling of the camera on any device a student takes home, which will limit then some of the things that might have been able to do. In some cases, it's like they're using the device's camera to complete assignments. So you have to rethink that.
Okay, and if we have time, we'll circle back, Dr. Harwood, but thank you for being here. We will then move on to opponent testimony, and we'll begin with Jillian Chapman, Superintendent, Blue Valley School District. Is Jillian online? No? Okay. Rob Dixon, Chief Information Officer for Wichita Public Schools on WebEx. Is Mr. Dixon online?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you and we can see you. Welcome to committee. You have 2.5 minutes, sir.
Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Rob Dixon. I'm Chief Information Officer. I want to begin by saying I share your concerns about the impact of screens and social media on our students. We see the same data as you do, and we hear the same worries from our parents. Where we differ is not on the goal of protecting kids, but on the method. Senate Bill 350 would lock us into a statute of rigid one-size-fits-all approach that would dismantle the careful research-based work districts like ours have already done to put balance in technology use, student well-being, and accessibility for students with disabilities. Over the past year, we've developed a comprehensive framework and guidelines. It sets clear, developmentally appropriate expectations by grade band. In kindergarten, there are no student devices at all. Any screen use is brief, teacher-led, and many days have none. In early elementary, screen time is capped in short, focused segments on shared iPads, and most of the day is still hands-on and face-to-face. In upper grades, we shift from how much to what kind, emphasizing active use like writing, collaboration, data analysis, creative projects, and explicitly banning practices like devices as rewards, unmonitored video time, or digital busy work. At every level, we're intentional about integrating assistive technologies, text-to-speech, speech-to-text, magnification, alternative input devices, and communications apps, so students with IEPs, 504 plans, and other learning needs can access the same rigorous curriculum as their peers as required by federal law. Senate Bill 350 would override this nuanced approach with a blunt rules of banning all digital devices at K-5, limiting middle and high school use to 60 to 90 minutes, regardless of instructional purposes, prohibiting one-to-one devices at middle school, and even requiring that cameras be disabled on school-issued devices. Yes, the bill includes exceptions for IEPs and 504 plans, but in practice, it creates two school systems in the same building, one where most students are barred from technology and another one where only those with documented disabilities are allowed to use it. That is stigmatizing for students with disabilities and makes it harder, not easier, to provide inclusive supports. It also means losing camera-based tools that many students rely on, from video modeling to visual supports to recorded explanations and sign language, as many as removing a key access point for students who communicate more effectively through audio or video than through print alone. The bill also pushes Kansas backward on assessment and curriculum, forcing a return to paper-based statewide testing and print-only textbooks at a time when most modern standards-aligned materials are digital first and include built-in accessibility features. Digital assessments and resources are not just convenient, they allow for screen readers, adjustable fonts, color contrast tools, embedded glossaries, and language supports that paper can't provide. For many of our students, those features are not a luxury, but are a difference between participating meaningfully in learning and being left out. Most importantly, the bill assumes that screen time is the problem when the research and our lived experience tells us how technology is used matters more than how long it is used.
Mr.
There's a
Dixon,
world- Yeah.
Mr. Dixon, your time has expired. Do you have a concluding remark, sir?
Yeah, I would just say that we oppose this bill, and I think it's to focus more on intentionality than screen time.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Next,
you.
we have Leah Fleider, Assistant Executive Director for the Kansas Association of School Boards. Welcome.
Thank you. I thought I was on. Thank you so much. Our members are committed to student safety, responsible technology use, and strong family engagement. And I just would like to say, as a former two-term member of the Manhattan-Ogden School Board, I was excited to see Dr. Casey Avey, who was over here. So yay, Manhattan master teacher. So KSB is here today to oppose SB 350 because it conflicts with state and federal law, undermines local control, and creates some significant compliance issues for our school board members. So as you know, Kansas has long entrusted instructional and operational decisions, including the use of school-issued devices, to locally elected boards of education. You've heard me talk about similar things in the past. SB 350 replaces this framework with a state-mandated grade-specific restriction and parental opt-out that prevents boards from responding to local needs and student accommodations and community expectations. It's also a shift away from that fundamental Kansas principle that decisions closest to the students are the most effective. So that would be decisions that are made at the local board level. Second, I'm just going to run through some federal laws that this bill conflicts with. And of course, because it's the federal government, there's a lot of acronyms. So under FERPA, which is the Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act, digital information from school devices is considered part of a student's education record, and districts have to apply privacy rules consistently. And so a student-by-student opt-out system would make compliance very difficult, if not impossible, and increase the risk of improper disclosure. We also have the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPA, which allows schools to provide consent for the use of educational technology. SB 350's opt-out requirement disrupts that federal model and would force districts into some pretty complex individualized tracking, which increases our chance of mistakes. And then the bill also complicates compliance with the Children's Internet Protection Act, CIPA, which governs E-rate funding, which federal law leaves those decisions to local boards, and SB 350 would interfere with that. So, Madam Chair, I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. And next we have Jim Carlskent, United School Administrators. Welcome back to committee.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and committee. Like Ms. Flighter, you've probably seen enough of me here the last few days, and it's not over yet. You know, you've got my written testimony, as you've got a lot of written testimony from today, and I heard quite a bit. You know, I'm not disagreeing with the proponents of this bill. You know, there are issues that need to be addressed. You know, I agree with a lot of the opposition with respect to a lot of things. The unfunded mandate certainly concerns me, and the one-size-fits-all certainly concerns me. You know, we've got so many small and rural school districts that would certainly be in a bind, you know, with this. And in the bill it says would go into effect January the 1st. That's a multi-million-dollar unfunded mandate that schools would have to come up with something. Now, granted, one of the proponents talked about how they could save money down the road on technology, but that much of an outlay would significantly be a burden. I guess my point is, Dr. Harwood mentioned that the state board is addressing it. Many school boards are already addressing it. Why don't we work together? I've said that too many times before, with the people that are involved closest to it, you know, and the legislature and the research that's been shown all of us, it makes sense. We went through it when we discussed the cell phone bill in the House, as well as here in this committee. You know, problems are, and it hurts our kids' mental health, but let's work together. And, you know, I think this bill, its intent is certainly worthwhile, but the way it gets there is certainly an overstep. So I won't take any more of your time because I know you've got a lot to do. So I'll stand for questions at the appropriate time.
Thank you. And did we ever get Jillian Chapman to join us? No. Okay, well. So that concludes our opponent testimony. What questions does the committee have for the opponents? Senator Petty, then Senator Shane.
So this, I guess, would be a question for Leah. And I'm not sure about this, and maybe you can answer it for me. So I was just thinking about my time in the classroom. It's been a while, but, you know, classrooms now have, I'm sure every classroom has like a smart board. And so does this bill impact any of that kind of classroom use, because that's integrated in every classroom?
Senator, that's a really good question, and I don't know if that's something the reviser could answer. I don't know. You know, they don't specifically mention smart boards in the bill, so I just don't know. That's a great question.
We'll ask, Tamara, do you have an answer or do we need to give you some time?
I will give a quick answer and then take a little bit of time after that. I believe most of the directions and the requirements are directed at student use of digital devices, but I want to comb through it one more time just to make sure I'm not missing anything.
Yes, and that would not be anything that's personally, issued to a student, but they do interact with them, so.
Senator Shane.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I think a lot of really fair points are brought up by the opponents as far as we think about tackling the issue. I do have one question, and maybe this is a combination of Ms. Fleiter and also Dr. Harwood. I believe right now, I don't know if it's State Board of Education policy, KSDE guidance, or where this falls, but I believe students or parents can opt their students out of using one-to-one devices in schools today. Could you help me understand that? And then if that's the case, if there is a student who has opted out of one-to-one use device today, but their parent still wants them to participate in the state assessment, are there provisions made to allow a student to still do the assessment without using a device?
Dr. Harwood.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think at this point, you could not take the state assessment without being on a device, but the parent could opt them out of taking the state assessment. So I think I'm just trying to remember from the survey, I don't believe that there's necessarily an opt-out of all one-to-one, but most districts you could opt out of taking the device home. So it would be, you may still be required to use the device at school, but would not have to take it home just because of there was not another delivery method available.
Okay. Maybe if you could help dig into that question a little bit as far as what's maybe state policy versus local policy. I know I'm thinking particularly about my local district, I believe has the opportunity to opt out, but assistance on that question would be great.
I tried to picture that. So there were some districts that said they could opt out of the one-to-one. More districts said you could opt out of taking the device home. I mean, you can't make them take the device home. It's just the problem is in some cases there may not be another delivery method that I get to, but we can get you the numbers on. These were how the districts answered it, and we can also find out if there is a state policy on it.
Senator Hill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question would be to Chief Information Officer Rob Dixon from Wichita. Is he still there?
Mr. Dixon, are you still online with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
Okay, if you would entertain a question from Senator Hill.
Sure.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and I appreciate proponents, opponents both recognize issues which you recognized in your testimony as well. I guess my question to you would be, you alluded to the fact that kindergartners were not exposed to digital devices. Am I correct on that?
Correct.
What about the rest of, so this bill focuses on K through 5. What about 1 through 5? Do you have hard copy curriculum for those children, or is their curriculum all on digital devices?
So I would say it's a hybrid approach. I mean, as many schools we have in Wichita Public Schools, I could tell you that we have an elementary school like Spate, which is focused on immersive coding. So that school has devices first grade through 5th. But then we have some other elementary schools that basically have iPads and carts. So I would say it's a lot of just about everything. It's a more complicated matter than just being a one-to-one at elementary level. But we shifted back, I would say 2 years ago, from a one-to-one at elementary post pandemic to kind of an intentional approach to devices, teaching digital literacy, teaching identity at the 3rd grade level, getting kids to understand what it means to be in a digital environment. And I still think that that's important at an elementary level.
So are you recognizing as a district that overexposure to digital devices is harmful to your children? Is that why you have switched back, or did you just do that for other reasons?
Some of it was budget initially, and usage. I would say it's probably a combination of the two, of budget and of being intentional about what screen time. Even our tech committee in our district read Jonathan Haidt's book, and I acknowledge some of the data that you see about screen time, but I think it's more about being intentional with what you're doing on that device. So I still go back to having an arbitrary number about screen time doesn't address the intentionality that can happen with that device.
If I may, so you mentioned budget there as a driving factor to have less screen time. It's been brought up here about the cost to move away from digital devices. So in your district, you see just the opposite. Is that true?
We do have one-to-one at middle school and high school. I go back to making sure that we're preparing kids for a future, right? When you look at high technology workforce places and environments, I think it's important to teach kids digital literacy so that they understand the impact of what they do in school and learning that to applying that to a workplace. As you progress, having access to that, and I think even the bill even outlines that, right? When you see it increasing that access for students, I just think that those having screen time as an arbitrary number is not the right way to address that.
So, and this will be my last question. I'll kind of finish up because I know we're running out of time here. But you've talked about the intentionality, and I think we can all agree that if there's anything that leads to success in life, it is being mathematic and English language arts literate. So has your intentionality of digital devices seen rapid increases in your reading scores and your mathematics scores?
I would have to grab that data. I don't have that data with me right now.
Because what we're seeing nationwide is just the opposite. And notwithstanding your first graders that are immersed in programming, I think the things that we expect to see from our children have a lot more to do with being able to function in the world as a whole than just being able to function in front of a screen. Thank you very much for answering my questions, and I appreciate you being here today.
Thank you. And we are going to have to leave it there. I know we're all excited to get to the floor and do the budget today. So this will close the hearing on Senate Bill 350. Committee, we are adjourned.